Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm just going over the process on this painting I've been working on for what feels like a lifetime. And in this stage, I'm just building up all the gouache layers from the previous underpainting I did. If you want to see how I did the underpainting and how I even started this complex piece, you can go click the link right here to go see that video. So when I began the underpainting, I mostly did watercolor pencils and very sheer washes of gouache paint. During this stage, when I was working on the center part of this painting, I just started building up the layers of gouache by focusing on the contrasting colors. So I added a lot more orange to the areas of the poppy petals that will have direct sunlight hitting them. And then I also included some purples and blues as a contrast color to make it look like there's shadows in the painting. Now, the border of this painting is just going to be green. Basically, I want it to give the look of like a US dollar, how the dollar bills here tend to have green etching. It kind of looks like there's cross hatching in it, and that's generally what I'm hoping to achieve with this border, but we will see. So I'm just starting off with cooler toned gouache paint. In the previous video, I showed like how I built this up, but in this stage, I'm basically trying to establish all of the shading and details around the border. And this isn't as complicated since it's going to be all one color. It's also not important to me for this to be super realistic looking because I want it to look like a dollar bill illustration or something like that. So basically my game plan for this portion of the painting later on when I'm at this more detailed stage is I plan on using Micron pens, and these are pens that are really good for pointillism. I used to use them all the time when I used to only do pointillism artwork, but basically they have different sizes and varying widths of them, and they're also great for cross hatching. So I think I'm going to layer that on top of this green when I'm done establishing the basic shadows and everything. And what I plan on doing with the pens is just cross hatching to add some texture, and then maybe going over that with a damp brush to kind of blend in some green a little bit into the ink. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's gonna work, but we'll see. You know, is it scary to experiment on something that has taken up so much of my life? Yes. Yes, it is horrifying. But you know what? I gotta do it. You won't know until you try, right? And it might end up looking like a disaster. Oh well, I'll paint over it and just take even more time on it. So it's great. It's so great. I don't know if you can tell from this footage here, but I tried going with a cooler toned green, and that's because I noticed money, it is cooler toned green, generally speaking. I noticed the dollar bills or whatever tend to look fake when they're too warm toned green. It reads as counterfeit to me, and I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look like money inspired, I guess. So that is why I went with a cooler toned green. Now I am using some warmer toned greens for the points and the cherubs and the snakes, just generally around the border where there's going to be high points of highlights. That is when I will introduce the warmer toned green, but I'm using it sparingly. I don't want it to be too saturated. And you know what? That kind of goes for the cooler toned green too. Even though it is more saturated than the warmer toned green I'm using, it's still pretty low in vibrancy. It's still green. When you look at it, you can tell it's green, but it's not like, oh my god, that's green, you know? Um, so I think that kind of adds to the money effect I was trying to go for. I really took the time to just try and get the border done. I noticed that it was hard for me to focus on the realism center portion with the pyramid and flowers of the painting because I was just so fixated on the fact that the border wasn't done. And I think I was dreading doing it because it's kind of boring. It's all one color for the most part, and I tend to overthink things, and because it wasn't super ultra realistic looking, I was like, wait, does that look right? But no, that's quite literally the stylized thing I was going for, so I need to calm down. So that's why I tried just really getting the border done, because I knew it was getting in the way of me focusing on the actual part of the painting that I wanted to look realistic, if that makes sense. So, any artists watching this, I'm curious to know, do you ever do this thing where you're working on a painting or drawing, whatever, and you're thinking about what you're gonna have to do on a part that you're currently working on in the future? Like, at this point, I was working on these snakes. And I was like, alright, it's looking good at this stage I'm going in. But I knew, like, in the future, at some point, I'm gonna have to add scales. And I'm gonna try and ignore that that's gonna happen. But I'm terrified for when I have to face that head on. But I'm just gonna ignore that and just do the basic shading. And everything's fine. It's fine. I'll figure it out. No lie, literally, as I am editing this video, I am at the point where I have to acknowledge that these snakes need scales. And I'm a little worried. Just send good vibes, please. Right here, I was working on the shading on like the underbelly part of the snake, which is such a weird part to draw. I'm so used to just doing their faces, but their bodies, even though they're just tubes, are so surprisingly intricate. Not just because of the scales, but because the underneath of them has like different scales, and I don't know. So I need to get better at painting snakes for sure because I want to include them in more paintings, but they're just a hard animal for me to render for some reason, so I don't know. Gotta figure that one out. But what I'm doing here is I'm just adding a darker cool toned green, and I'm just putting that in the ridges of the underbelly as well as underneath its face and jaw that's away from the light source. I do want to make it a note that I realize the light source for the border is not the same as the center of the painting, and I did do that on purpose. It was kind of a weird decision to make, but I think it makes sense with the fact that the border is going to be stylized, whereas the center of the painting is going to be realism to the best of my ability. Whereas the border, because it's going to be obviously stylized, is going to read a little bit more two-dimensional than the center. And I'm okay with that. That's what I want. I want the border to look like an etched illustration. But I didn't want the light source to make it look funny. If you notice, the light source in the center of the painting is direct sunlight coming from the right side and casting shadows across to the left, and I felt like that would be awkward for the border. I like borders, frames, ornate embellishments to have very even lighting because I want it to be treated as a frame that adds to the focus to the center of the piece. So I didn't want any crazy lighting that made any uneven shadows and things like that across the cherubs. I wanted them to be evenly lit. However, what I did do is the pieces of the border, like the snakes, as they go towards the center of the painting, towards the pyramid, they get lighter. So basically, I am treating the center of the painting as if it's the light source for the border. And that adds to the tunnel vision effect that I want. It leads your eye to the center of the painting, and then if you want more information, you read around, and it's just a nice layered effect that I was going for and really helps it treat the border like a frame. Alright, so once I got the border done with the basic shading and values in green, I went ahead and started focusing more attention on the center of the painting. I felt like it was getting pretty flat compared to the border, and I was like, alright, I think it's time for me to start on this now. So beforehand, I did do a wash of blue and purple gouache for the sky, and I wanted more colors involved because it's going to be a sunset type of sky, so there's going to be a lot of colors. So I lightened it up with some white and introduce some yellow as the sky meets the horizon of the desert. And the reason why I blended that up with white gouache paint is because, first of all, it just created a very even gradient, which is kind of hard to get with gouache sometimes. And I also felt that the colors I laid down previously, while they are the colors I wanted, they were a little too dark and saturated for me. So I just went in with white gouache paint, and it really helped smooth everything out and allowed me to reintroduce some new colors to the color gradient that you would expect from a sunset. The really tricky part about the sky is making the sky meet the horizon with yellow, like the reference photo I was using, because the more you blend, the more you end up just making green, and you don't want the sky to be green. So the white also helped with that. It helped prevent any more green happen. But I also did put some orange on top of the yellow to really just enhance the yellow once I blended it out and it kind of lightened up. There was still a little bit of orange left over and it just reads as like bright yellow. So that's what I did here. And I'm blending it up, and yes, it is making a little bit of green, but it's not too much. It's not like the green like the border, and I really didn't want that in the sky, so yeah. And I'm blurring out the edges into the horizon a bit here with my angled brush. So I did add some purple to the side of the pyramid where there's going to be more shading. And after I placed all the undertones, I just started mapping out where I want more of the brick texture in the pyramid. And this is something I really detailed later on. I'll show you in the next video how I got this to look even more real. But before I went into that very detailed stage, I just wanted to add a little bit of subtle texture before I started painting in any cracks and things like that. And basically how I did this was by getting my flat brush, and I got a very pale beige color and just started making little rectangles around the pyramid. And what's nice about gouache is that it mixes with the layer underneath, so even when I use that same color on the shaded side, it made like the right color for the subtle highlights there. Now, this part can be pretty nerve-wracking for people. It used to be for me when I wasn't used to doing any landscape illustration, but the clouds were very orange, and I just got done doing a perfect gradient for the sky, so it can be kind of intimidating to just then place a crap ton of orange on top, but that was the color of the clouds. Now, what I did was I basically grabbed my flat brush and used a basic yellow orange color and placed that on top of the sky. And before I added any highlights or any shadows to it, I took my flat brush with my left hand, so use your least dominant hand, and I just started blurring out the edges a bit. And I did this when I added highlights with a brighter yellow later on too, because sometimes if you're an overthinker, it's hard to draw something that's so effortless, like clouds. Clouds are so effortless looking, and you get into trouble when you try too hard to make them look perfect. So try to force yourself to have less control over what you're painting, and I promise you it will help. Right here, I am reintroducing some red gouache back into these poppy flowers. And I did this to blend the orange in a little bit. And I'm also using a new gouache color I haven't used before. I forget what it's called, but it's like a reddish violet. And I'm using that as the shadows underneath some of the petals in the poppies. And I felt like this was a good color for the shadows because the poppies are in direct sunlight, so even the shadows are going to have a little bit of warmth to them. And I also felt like it encouraged the feel of direct sun shining through the petals because poppy petals are very fragile and dainty looking. They tend to be very thin and wrinkly. So, yeah. After that, I am using some more red, but it has more of an orange tone to it, and I'm just using that in the areas of the petals that are in direct light and have subtle shadows. We're now going into the stage where we need to make more specific colors for the details. So that was it for this video. I hope that me talking about the process is somewhat entertaining and somewhat helpful. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And also, please just send me good vibes because I need to finish this painting, and I am so close to finishing it, but my god, you guys, it has been it has been a journey trying to finish this. It was just a lot. Anyways, I'll see you guys next week. Bye!